Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we are joined once again by the one and only Adam Kokesh, and of course one of my favorite anarchists, author of Freedom, a veteran, YouTuber now posting on DTube, the Steam It linked YouTube alternative, and of course one of the ballsiest activists I think I've ever met. Thank you for joining me again.
Why do people keep talking about my genitalia? I don't get it.
I can't. I don't even know what to say to that. So carrying on. Now let's talk about one of the more controversial topics in the libertarian community, and that would be borders. Now, you recently did an excellent job debating borders with Stefan Molyneux, and can you explain to the viewers that are small government, and not yet in the realm of voluntarism, why borders are an act of aggression and violence?
Well, normally I'd be inclined to start with that hardcore philosophical answer, but if I may first come at this from a practical perspective, because it's been a change and a shift for me to get away from, you got to get everybody to agree with our principles and understand our ideology, and be like, no, well, our principles are useless if we don't create practical policy from them. So when I look at the issue of immigration, I see that there is a natural state of harmony that humanity can achieve when we have people able to travel in line with their economic needs. And when I was studying the issue for a debate, I came across this analysis that showed if we got rid of government borders just as a means of restricting freedom of labor being able to move, for people to seek jobs and work, human productivity globally would double. That means we have this potential as a species, and just the fact that governments keep people from relocating their physical bodies geographically to pursue their economic interests, our productivity as a species, as a human family, is cut in half. If you just got rid of that, that means that either all of our quality of life levels would double, or we'd all have to work half as much. So when it comes to this idea of using government to artificially control freedom of movement, we know that governments don't protect people. Like, that's not their interest. If they do, it's not like a service provider legitimately providing protection for you. It's more like a cattle rancher protecting his cattle so that they can be slaughtered, or so as tax cows that we can be fleeced. As sheeple, we can be fleeced. But this idea is based on a false premise of a forced collective to begin with. To say that, because government has this whole territory, then it gets to decide who's in or out. Now, I own a little homestead farm, 10 acres in Arizona, and to me, it's just an affront to say, no, Adam, you can't invite anyone from anywhere on the world to visit your property without our permission. Really? That's insane. But there's this old, conservative bumper sticker cliche of when guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns. And the same is true about immigration. When you outlaw immigration, only outlaws will immigrate. No government is effectively capable. You even look at Israel, right? They've got some really big walls. They still claim to have major problems with the threat of terrorism, because nothing government does is going to be effective for achieving its stated goals. Now, is it possible to have a bubble, to really wall off a society or a culture? Sure. But you're never going to be able to do that with a government and over a large-scale territory. There will always be a way to beat the system. You say tall walls and wide gates, or big doors, whatever. We're going to let a lot of people in, but we claim the right to screen them. There's no way that, look at the TSA. And you want to turn to them for the same institution for border security to protect you in a meaningful, important way. Now, it's really important for me to get into the principle here, because as a matter of principle, I want every individual to have freedom of movement. The only restriction being private property. You don't have freedom to come on my property. I don't have freedom to come on yours, but I can't control what you do off of my property. And so this isn't pro or anti-borders. The question is, are you for government borders, or are you for legitimate borders? And there are legitimate borders. My 10-acre property has a half-mile border that is very legitimate, and it's got a nice fence and a nice gate. And I built that. I made that happen. You can tell Obama I built that. But this is a decision that society is facing right now as immigration becomes a major issue, or I suppose in some ways it always has been. But you look at the motivations. If you really want an effective filter for the land of the free here, have our government stop messing with other countries and end the welfare state. That's it. That's the only filter you need. The market is the filter, and the only legitimate borders are private property borders.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something that's really important, and that's, the voluntarist side of things. So, I mean, in a voluntarist society, it's not that government can't exist, it's that one must have, actual voluntary governance. So whether it be self-governance or a voluntary society, private contract kind of borders, and everyone has to kind of agree on that. If one person doesn't agree, then it's not exactly a voluntary situation unless they've signed that contract. So with that said, I mean, in that kind of situation, people have become so dependent on government and military to save their ass from, these spooky people from overseas. And it's not to say that there aren't some spooky people that can come in, but the idea...
The spookiest ones are wearing suits in Washington.
Well, most certainly. That's the organized crime racket that we're talking about. But when it comes down to it, I mean, if every individual was well able to defend themselves, what terrorist, whether armed by the CIA or not, would come in and try and attack people? Like the emperor from Japan said many years ago, a gun behind every blade of grass.
Admiral Yamamoto, before World War II, why did they not attack the mainland? A rifle behind every blade of grass. And you're absolutely right to make the connection with the other security state issues and the militarism and that forced collectivist mentality, and that we can trust the government to protect us. It's insane. But there's something even more fundamental, and this is where I think it really is important, especially for Americans, the citizens of the empire, to challenge the status quo and to really fundamentally examine our own thinking and what it means to be American, what freedom really means. Because most Americans, it's a nice slogan. It's something we talk about once a year on Independence Day, right? As opposed to recognizing that freedom is a fundamental ethical principle. And as much as you can criticize the founders for this, that, and the other, I'm proud. It's weird for me to embrace any kind of patriotism. But the one thing that makes me proud to be an American is that we have this heritage, that the country was founded on the principles of freedom and by overthrowing the biggest empire the world had ever known. And we get to do that again now in our generation. With the militarism thing, the connection is so important because the founders of this country were against what they called a standing army entirely, aka the military. They advocated for the militia defense. And as you hit on, I have my favorite line that I'll say till the end of time, every chance I get: the best defense is a well-armed population that refuses to be governed by anyone. The founders knew this. This is a fundamental truth about human nature.
Well-armed militia.
Yeah, well, ultimately, it doesn't have to be a militia. That sort of is, in and of itself, centrally planning a specific response, right? Maybe the Gandhian approach. Maybe you don't have to. Maybe all you have to be well armed with is the courage to stand up in the face of violent oppression. Yeah. And I think absolutely you have a right to defend yourself violently if necessary.
By the way, you should have a right to defend yourself, but you don't.
Right. Right. As a felon, I'm limited legally in what I can do.
So keep good people around you.
But I do want to say, and this is very important for the American people to understand, that if we want to embrace Americanism, if we want to embrace freedom, if we want to live up to our heritage, and once again, overthrow the greatest empire the world has ever seen, we have to recognize that the United States military is an un-American institution.
Yes, and hitting on the military, obviously you have experience. Going into that a little bit about the problem, reaction, solution, repeat kind of thing, the Hegelian dialectic, I suppose some call it, is that, the military goes overseas, blow up babies, blow up women and children, cause a whole bunch of people to be pissed off, and many become more extreme. They get armed and funded by the United States or by other governments around the world. Then the government tries to cause a culture war, brings a whole bunch over here that don't really fit in with the culture, and try and divide the populace. Like I remember in the early 2000s, CNN was constantly attacking Muslims. And then suddenly one day it switched to constantly, praising Muslims. And this idea of, this trigger in the mind of the populace of now everyone's kind of going at each other. Each one has an opinion that they're repeating from something they saw on television. Then, the refugees get more money than most people on welfare do, and it causes a lot of people to be mad. It's a perfect, Hegelian dialectic because it just keeps repeating. I can't imagine why we would need preemptive, and I'll make the word preemptive as clear as possible because that's what I kept thinking when I was watching you on Molyneux. Preemptive borders, because that's all it is. It's, well, in the future this thing could happen. When, if you're going to continue creating the problem, how is government going to come in and solve the same problem it's been creating for so long? And you saw this in Iraq, the beginning really of this dependency on government to take care of us from the people whose lives they destroyed. I mean, can you go into that at all?
Well, the way I saw it in my time, and I did 7 months in Fallujah with the Marine Corps Civil Affairs team in 2004. So we were making enemies faster than we could kill them. And you go, that's not how you win anything. No. And if you give the government the power to control the flow of information and the power to defend you with militarism and to go off and chase monsters, they're going to make a lot of monsters. If that's what we have to do to raise that fear specter to get the American people to be compliant, then yeah, that's what we're going to do. And the people who really pull the strings in society, they don't care about your life. Like that's a really, and it's if you really are raised with respect for authority and a lot of statist propaganda, it's really hard because we get, just from a projection of our relationships with our parents, we project that onto government. And I think we really have to break that, because even a halfway honest view of history goes, holy crap, the greatest source of violence in the world is governments.
Yeah, it's easy to become dependent on mommy and daddy government because, you're comfortable as a child, you're dependent as a child, and then you grow up and it's easier in the short term at least to depend on the government. But we all know what it turns into. Even the smallest form of government grows, and it will continue to grow.
And part of what you were getting at, that deliberate fostering of fear and conflict, part of the effect of that is insecurity for the individual. The fear has an effect on you that very much makes you feel that you need to turn to a greater authority, that you need a father or mother figure in your life. And of course, government is ready there to transpose themselves into that role and say, well, it's okay, we've got this under control. You got to be afraid of terrorism, but don't worry, government will protect you. And we're going to look back on this era of humanity and go, holy crap, we were not just robbed of dollars and lives and resources, we were robbed of emotional freedom as a species, as a human family. That was taken from us because we didn't see until now, where we are seeing this globally, that governments are fundamentally rackets. But part of what we need to do in doing that is to step up and become adults, in every way possible, to stand up and say, and this is something it's funny because you started off talking about my balls, and it's great here, at Anarchapulco, where, I'm surrounded by people who are familiar with my work, and they go, oh my gosh, you're so brave. And I'm like, well, thanks. Maybe it's just more confidence in my calculated risk, but
maybe you're just a little crazy.
Well, yeah, that helps. Yeah. But war crazy. Yeah. But I think people have give us too much credit. I mean, even you, like you're doing great work in independent media, and they go, oh my gosh, Josh, you've got it all together, and you're on camera, and you've got a microphone, and you're organized, and you've got a producer helping you out, and oh my gosh, and then you look like an adult, and I think it's important to realize that as part of the human struggle, the evolution that we're going through right now, this particular phase of development is a maturation moment for all of us. And even for me, a lot of times people, look at my public persona, or they look at the more famous things that I've done, and they go, oh, well, you must be a perfectly self-actualized adult male human being with, and it's like, no, man, I'm full of bullshit and insecurities and self-doubt and, all that other stuff. And I have to do the math. And part of it is that, and if I may change the subject just a little bit on this, because this is also something that, is very important to me here. Not only that we realize that what we are doing as freedom activists, as journalists even, is elevating humanity that way. It's encouraging the sovereignty and the wholeness of every human being. And in our movement, and I don't know if this is legitimate, organic. I know some of it is. I don't know if it's infiltration or COINTELPRO type crap. But sometimes you see a sort of crabs in the bucket kind of mentality. And I think this is just a fundamental dynamic of human nature that I see is particularly destructive in the freedom movement. And it's that, when you have crabs in a bucket and one of them tries to crawl out, the other ones just pull them down. And I'd like to see that shift. And I know that it's shifting anyways, and that nothing that I can say here is going to be more than a nudge in the right direction. But right here, especially when I see this community, and this is one of the better events, when we see people really coming together, I think it is essential that if we want to take leadership, and this is the other thing, is that I think a lot of libertarians are afraid to take leadership. And it's kind of a cop-out from being a fully actualized human being to say, oh, well, we don't need to be involved in politics. We don't really need to confront the system. We can just check out, and it's like, no, you can't, because you leave the country, now you're subject to the American government's foreign policy. It's even worse. You could get hit by a drone strike. Doesn't happen so much, at least in the U.S. borders, even though it happens to U.S. citizens outside of U.S. borders. So I'd like to think that there's an opportunity in this moment in the movement of shifting the culture. I'm trying to come up with, can we have a secret handshake where we go united in freedom, or freedom family, but I don't know if there's some cliche that can capture it, but I can tell it's happening. I think there is a shift in that, and that there are people who are saying, yeah, we need to take leadership in the broader society. That it's not okay for us to sit here and be right about everything in our little corner. It's not right for humanity. It's not right for global productivity. It's not right for the economy. It's not right for justice. It's not right for me. I don't want to live in a world where I'm on a seastead and I have to defend it with machine guns against government agents all the time, and I'm cut off economically because the statists have taken over the rest of the population and gotten in their heads. No, I want to live in a world where everybody has this. My world, because of me, out of selfishness. No. I mean, yes, you can call it altruism. I don't really believe in that. But, no, I mean, it's that's the world I want to see, where everybody is a fully actualized human being. And if the sooner we lock that on for ourselves as activists and develop that culture of mutual support and building each other up. And I will say one more thing before we get back to your questions, but I hope that you've appreciated, Josh, that you got to interview me from jail live, and that I've always been supportive and encouraging of you, and I'm not singling you out, but that this is something that I've always made a part of my practice of lifting up other activists. The things that I'm most proud of in my career are not the things that I've done, but the things that I've seen other people do, that I've empowered them to do, that I've given them the critical experience or exposure and training. And you mentioned STEAM earlier. STEAM it, really important. Just one little thing there. I want to share other people's posts. I want to lift other people up. I want to spread the love and strengthen the network and strengthen the freedom family and ultimately the human family. And I wish. I'd like to say I've got a pretty good track record of this. When people go to jail, when we see other activists go to jail, I'm there making videos. I'm there to help them. I'm there to spread the word. When I see other activists struggling financially, I'm there to help out when I can, or at least bring attention to them and get them help. And there are too many of us as libertarians who are individualists. And you can look at our philosophy as individualist. It's based on the divinity of the individual rights, self-ownership. But you could just as well analyze it from the perspective of relationships. Sure. You could describe the entire thing by saying, no, human relationships should be voluntary. Yeah. It means more loving. When they're free of force and coercion, at least it's respectful. And to me, that's founded in a universal human family kind of love.
Well, sure. And I mean, you brought up something that's so important because, I mean, most of the time I have no idea what I'm doing. It just happens to work. I believe in it and it happens. And, coming to a conference like Acapulco, I remember last year, I mean, I'd interviewed you before, but I finally met you in person. I met Luke Rudowski in person, who you helped significantly early on. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of these people, these connections, then later on, you're calling me from prison and, I'm on a show on We Are Change and I'm working with, Press for Truth all the time and all these different people, and it's truly incredible what you can accomplish if you work with other people. And it's that voluntary collectivism, because collectivism isn't bad. It's just that when it's forced, then you are a slave. But when you are voluntary, you work with other people, you can accomplish pretty much anything you set out to do. And it's an incredible thing. It's a beautiful thing. And it's a lot better than being what they call, I guess, a basement anarchist. And a lot of people that are basement anarchists come out to this event. And this isn't anything against them. This
is an invigorating experience for them. This is a turning point.
Yeah, they're suddenly talking to people. They're used to typing on Facebook or something. They're suddenly talking with people that they really appreciate, complete strangers. They just walk up to them and they can have any conversation with them because it's like, oh, it's almost like I've known you 10 years, you know?
Because you've got a name tag and it says Anarchapulco. And you're part of the family.
And Jeff spelt my name wrong too. Twice, 2 years in a row. Anyway, so with that said, Adam, I heard recently
He didn't spell it wrong. He's an anarchist. He spelled it how he wanted to.
Yeah, how he wanted. Yeah, sure. I'm watching you, Jeff. Anyway, with that said, I heard recently that you were thinking of writing another book, maybe on what happened to you in Iraq and your experience.
No, it's done actually, and it was when I got arrested that I was finishing the manuscript and getting ready to shift into the publishing phase and the crowdsourced editing phase. And it's called Hot, Dirty, and Dangerous, How 7 Months in Fallujah Challenged My Patriotism. And it's, 14 years late. This is from something that happened in 2004. But you see that the mythology, the lies of the war are what has persisted. Chris Kyle is a hero. Dakota Meyer is a hero. And it's like, take 5 minutes on the internet and a little bit of honesty, and you'll see that they're both horrendous liars.
I once spoke with Chris Kyle many years ago, and not the nicest guy I've ever talked to in my life. And of course, yeah, so many people want to say, well, he's dead, so let's respect him. But I mean, when you kill innocent people, it's kind of hard to, like in your case, you did things that weren't good, but after that, you did everything in your power to earn back your respect for yourself.
Yeah, I've considered a lot of my activism kind of like penance, and certainly at first I was very much motivated by that guilt. And I went to Iraq with good intentions, even though they were misguided. And this is another important part of this book, that it talks about how even someone with the best of intentions can be turned by the circumstance of war, by government orders, to do the greatest evil that a human being can do to another. And I never fired my weapon in country. I was a driver most of the time. I was on a civil affairs team. We got shot at a lot, but hey, they said, if you're shooting, who's driving? So most of the time people were shooting at muzzle flashes and shadows and things like that anyhow, in the circumstances I found myself.
Well, everyone was terrified.
Yeah, well, yeah, and justifiably so. If you're going to go mess with people and violate their sovereignty and impose martial law, they're going to resist. No kidding. You should be afraid trying to impose martial law on people who want to be free. Yeah. And the thing that of course, there's the general responsibility that I have for all of the evil that happened in Iraq during that time and since then that I did not oppose, that I bear that collective responsibility for. But specifically in my case, and this was relatively mild compared to a lot of people's experiences there, but I tortured people. And it was one night for a 4-hour shift to guard detainees. And I was told, I was given instructions for guarding them that were basically sleep deprivation torture. And that's what I did.
But just as someone who's been watching you since 2007, I remember watching you in The Winter Soldier, and the amount of good work that you've done since has changed so many people's lives. And I think at this point in your life, you've done more good than the harm that you did back then. And it's hard to say that, but I mean, the amount of people that have been exposed to the message of freedom is just unbelievable because of the work that you've done over your career.
Yeah, it's tempting in that analysis to try to quantify these things, and I don't think it's appropriate to. But I've certainly experienced more than 4 hours of sleep deprivation and torture in my civil disobedience and in the jail time that I've done. So I still have some processing of all of that to do for myself, because there is still an element of guilt that so far has been impossible to shake. Yeah. And part of me wants to hold on to that because it's guilt, it's unpleasant, but it's also kind of beautiful to recognize it as such. It's not just, oh yeah, somebody thinks I owe them money, because I'm guilty of that. No, like I recognize it as a moral transgression of my own, and it's always been a motivator for me. So maybe I'm just holding on to that, and maybe I'll be ready to let it go when the state is ready to let go.
Absolutely. As you said so aptly, as you loaded a shotgun in Freedom Plaza, we must take back our humanity. And that's what it really comes down to. Liberty and humanity are synonymous. And the second that we let one of them go, we lose the point of life itself. Is preservation of life, preservation of liberty. That is life in general. And, I've often said the only person you truly have control over in your life is yourself. And without that, you lose the basis of life itself. And you've done such important work. And to end it off on more of a happy side of things, can you talk about, how people can continue to support you for Not President? I mean, you're here for once. You're not dressed like me in blue plaid. I was surprised.
It's my chauffeur's outfit.
Yeah, and in the very hot heat, you are determined, wearing a suit. Not easy in Acapulco, but can you just go into your Not for President run and where people can support you for Not President?
Thank you. And it's much more accurate to say that what I'm doing with this presidential campaign is turning the American presidential election into a referendum on whether or not the federal government should be allowed to exist at all. So the platform is the immediate dissolution of the United States federal government. The only thing I would do as president is go in and sign one executive order, and with this executive order, resign to be custodian of the federal government. As an ethical person, I can't be president. It's a position that shouldn't exist. It's absurd. No one should have that arbitrary power over other human beings. No one should have that authority or that ability to do violence. So of course, no, I would never be president. That is anathema to my values and principles. So I'm going in as a bankruptcy agent, and I'm using the American presidential process to ask the American people for the authority to say, look, we don't want to support the federal government anymore. It shouldn't exist. Let's take it apart in a peaceful, orderly, responsible manner that leaves us with 50 independent states, plus territories, plus now sovereign native nations. And this is something that is uniting people, left, right, and center, against the common enemy that is big government and centralized government. But I just want people to know that this, for your audience especially, that this is really an important tactical shift for us in politics as a movement. Instead of going, well, we're going to argue ideology and principles, and if you don't agree with me on everything, you're wrong. You say, look, these are my principles. From my principles, this is the policy that I can create that makes everyone's life better immediately. That unites people. When we stop arguing ideology, we can stop being a debate club and be a political force. So, we can't even, libertarians argue amongst themselves, and they miss the opportunity to communicate to the broader public, hey, we have a plan, hey, we have a platform. And it's not, and it's never gonna work as, I wanna be president, and I'm gonna show you how a libertarian is president. It's like, no, you're not, that's not possible, And right now, we're really focused on winning the nomination within the Libertarian Party.
So this isn't in any way an educational, run.
Not an educational campaign, although we know that by a sort of very least benefit standard, we will get more than our money's worth back in the educational component as well. But no, we are drawing a line in the sand that says you're either on the side of the federal government or on the side of the American people. We're going to liquidate the federal government's assets, those that aren't localized to the states, and use them to pay back the true creditors of the government, not the foreign banks or governments or corporations, but the American people. And so those funds are going to go to fund the VA, a spun off as an institution where every veteran gets one ownership voting share. I guarantee you, put the VA in the hands of veterans, you're not going to have 20 suicides a day. And the rest, probably Social Security. Now, there might be so much, because so much has been stolen from us for so long. I don't know how it's all going to be distributed. It might be that we're funding Social Security for decades. It might be that we have to lower the retirement age to 40. It might be that we're funding Medicare and Medicaid and S-CHIP for decades to provide the transition for state governments to become stable. And as soon as we see that, it's going to be a race to get it down to the community level, and that's the ultimate goal. So while we're focused right now on building a national organization to take over the Libertarian Party, we have a lot of corruption in the party to deal with. The campaign is so far ahead of schedule right now, mainly because of the arrest. We got so much publicity out of that. And you know that the message of freedom, of voluntarism itself, has like a 99+ retention rate, right? You know, you cannot unlearn what you have learned. You cannot unsee what you have seen. And when you go, oh yeah, government's a racket. Oh yeah, people can get along better without coercion. How about that? You don't go back to, well, let's just go back to pointing guns at people. Yeah. No, and I think, and with the average American, from my experience doing 3 national tours, doing man on the street videos, talking to regular people, they're ready for this. And I think the effect of this platform, this message, is going to be the same. No one's going to go, you know what? Adam's right. We would be better off without the federal government. And then, no, let's do 4 more years of Trump and fighting and division and forcing everybody into this one-size-fits-all solution that just keeps everybody at each other's throats. That division that you mentioned that's artificially generated, as opposed to, no, look, when we respect individual rights, when we respect community rights, that communities have a right to organize how they see fit. We don't have to impose our vision of anarchy or communism or socialism or conservatism or liberalism on anybody else. Everybody gets what they want. That's what this is. Localization is the everybody gets what they want strategy. So my goal is not just to be the presumptive nominee of the Libertarian Party or to be the presumptive president in 2020. My goal, and now I see this happening potentially this year, that we will have so fundamentally shifted the American political conversation that it will be presumed that the American people are going to decide in 2020, we're not going to have a federal government anymore. We don't have to be united under one government to be united in American values. And so for people to help out, right now, if you want to help get involved in the Libertarian Party, please be a delegate in your state. We're in the middle of state convention season right now. I'm doing a national tour, going to as many as I can, leading up to the national convention, New Orleans, July 4 weekend. And if you want to help out on the bigger picture, spreading the message, please, my main website is thefreedomline.com, 3 words, thefreedomline.com. And from there, you can find kokeshforpresident.com and sign up to volunteer and use this as a way to spread the message, wake people up, but really, most importantly, draw a line in the sand that is going to help empower humanity and move us all forward.
Yeah, and wrapping it up, it was really nice to see you. I've known for a long time that it's always been principle over party for you, but it was just a nice thing to see recently with the whole situation with Ron Paul and the Libertarian Party and all that. You took principle over party, and I think that really vindicates a lot of people's beliefs about you as a real individual who actually cares about the message and isn't going to go off in left field or off in right field at the last second, you know, right before you become president. Oh, well, maybe we'll give a little bit of welfare there and maybe we'll stay in Afghanistan. Yeah, that's not going to happen with you.
About that, the executive order by which we would do the dissolution will be available on our website by the 2020 National Convention for the LP, months ahead of the general election. So the American people will know exactly what they are voting for. And it's not for me to be president. It's for this plan that we're coming up with based on this approach and these principles. So you're going to get, for the first time in American history, you're going to have a real choice. Do you want an old party, corrupt politician to be in charge of the country, or nobody for president? For the first time, we're going to have a real vote. And you are going to know exactly what you are voting on in this executive order by the time you go to vote in 2020. And what I've told people about this, first of all, some people raise the challenge, well, that's unconstitutional. Yeah, that's the point. We're invoking the higher authority called the Declaration of Independence, which says we have a duty to alter and abolish systems of government that no longer serve us. Who's going to really object to that? But, well, Adam, the Supreme Court, but Adam, the senator or congressman is going to... You really think that if the American people as a whole decide we're not going to let this happen anymore, that some jerk in a suit in Washington is going to stop us? No way. Not even this jerk in a suit. Because if I go in there, and you know what, I go on day one and say, and they bring me the executive order, and I go, bring me the dictator for life one instead. Let me sign that. No, shoot me. Shoot me. And that should be our standard. If anyone is willing to impose violent authority over you, and break their promises and break their commitments. If the American people stood true to those principles from the beginning, we wouldn't be in this situation right now. But we have to reaffirm, and it should be peaceful by all means necessary, with the backstop of, no, you are ready to defend yourself. And that is absolutely the very, very last resort. And I think it ultimately is never going to be necessary. But if you have to shoot me to accomplish that, don't let my life stand in your way.
I always like it when the 2012 Adam comes through in you, where you're like, Sparta. But keep up the great work, Adam. I love your work. I am going to support your work all the way through, because I know a principled person when I see them, and I know someone who actually cares about freedom when I see them. And the amount of BS that you've been through, especially even over the last few years, I'm not going to get into it, but just nonstop, BS, gossip, crap that it tries to throw away everything else that you've worked so hard on over the years. Prison terms, I mean, it's so ridiculous.
If you're not catching flack, you're not over the target.
Exactly. So my apologies for my voice today. I've been talking all day with many great
Same
people.
here.
Yeah. Like I sound like I have a cold. I assure you I do not. It's Acapulco, another beautiful day in Acapulco. I thank you, Adam, for talking with us once again, and keep up the great work.
My pleasure, brother.
Like what you see here, OM, don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so vastly demonetized and censored by YouTube as the ADL comes in and flags all of our content as hate speech. You can also find our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan, if you please. And don't forget to find us at Josh Sigurdson at steemit.com. That's steemit.com, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post in cryptocurrency, Steem that is. So don't forget to find us there, and until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.